Assalamu alaikum and a very good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming here and really appreciate the fact that everyone is here for some, real discussion, academic discussion, I would say. Seeing Pakistani youngsters sitting over here is quite, a happy moment for me. And I would really like to thank Future Fist management for coming over here and organizing such an amazing event where youngsters and young innovators are here for, startups and all that stuff. Well, my name is Asad Naveed again. I'm a news anchor at Channel 5, and just because I'm here doesn't mean that I'm, thoroughly, from climate change or climate perspective. I'm here as a common man, as a layman. I really want to understand the fact that Pakistan is suffering from climate catastrophe since a very long time. The dilemma is this, that most of us don't even understand what climate change is here. If I really don't want to fall into the stats that Pakistan has lost a lot, billions and trillions in climate catastrophe. But the whole point is this, that seeing the future and what the agenda speaks for itself, that climate finance, can Pakistan make it? So that's the whole question. It is as simple as the agenda sounds like, that climate finance, can Pakistan make it? So that's the question I would really like to begin with. But the whole thing is this, that again, from a common man's perspective, seeing businesses around here, cartelization, monopolization, we're crying for $1 billion from IMF. Is it really possible for Pakistan to get all the billions and trillion dollars, in the textbook written by Paris Agreement and all the climate big, monsters sitting in the first world country, Annex 1? So thank you once again for coming in here. I'll take my seat over there and start the conversation with the, much more academic people over here. So thank you so much for coming over here again. So I'll just begin with introducing the panelists over here. So we do have Vardah Malik, right in between us, CEO of Profectus Advisory Services. She provides a technical assistance on assessing and advising on how their clients can make good transition on contributing towards low carbon, climate resilient, and environmental sustainable economy. So probably we're going to ask you how the transition can work through in Pakistan, because again, this is not US or Europe where things are much more easier. Then we have Salman Tariq sitting right at the right of me, and he's the co-founder and CEO of Davaam. He's a policy maker and in recycling environmental technology. And again, that's a big question, because Pakistan, where people get tax-free cigarettes and all that stuff, recycling is a big deal. But he does have a lot of things to recycle, but I don't know if he's able to make it or not. And then we do have Then we have Saadia Qayyum here, energy specialist. That's the big deal, because load shedding in winters is the worst thing you can do, and you can assist. So energy specialist is here. She worked in World Bank, and she is in Women in Energy Pakistan co-chair. And as an energy economist, I would really like her to take a time and put our for the broader picture, how can we get out of the energy crisis, where all the imports, all the circular debt is on you guys. So thank you once again for coming over here. So I'll just start off with a very basic question. What is climate finance, if I may ask you, Mr. Salman?
Thank you. Just a background, मैं एक entrepreneur भी हूँ. थोड़ा सा कोशिश कर रहा हूँ, जैसे आयशा ने बहुत ज़बरदस्त presentation की कि वो लोग as a big corporate क्या कर सकते हैं. I think the good thing about us is that there's a lot of young people probably over here in this conference as well, using technology and other means to also put in solutions which can tackle some of the things in climate. And one of the things that I'm doing as Davaam, CEO of Davaam, is at the very start of plastic waste. We're trying to, Aisha said that they're doing things about how do we get rPET into the system and recover. I take one step further कि उस प्लास्टिक को फेंकने के बजाय आप 4-5 दफ़ा अगर रीयूज़ करें तो शायद ज़्यादा बेहतर होगा, फिर उसको रिसाइकल करें. सो हमारी वेंडिंग मशीन्स, रीफिल स्टेशंस हमने बनाए हैं, जिसमें हम सोप्स, शैम्पूज़, कुकिंग ऑयल जो हम हर महीने ख़रीदते हैं, फेंक देते हैं, ख़रीदते हैं, फेंक देते हैं, उसकी कॉस्ट अदा कर रहे होते हैं. So what we're trying to do is a new system of retail where you can actually reuse that plastic, which is completely fine and reusable, so that you end up just paying for the product. And 40 to 50% of the cost that we end up paying every month in discarded plastic, the product is less valuable than the packaging that it contains. So it's a huge waste. So मैं एक solution provider हूँ जो एक solution लेके निकला हूँ market में. और just to link it with climate finance, unfortunately यहाँ पे एक बहुत बड़ा disparity है. और हम जैसे लोग हैं जो innovators हैं, जो बिल्कुल एक नई चीज़ लेके आते हैं, उनके पास solution है, और जो finance वाले हैं वो बिल्कुल they want something else, right? Everybody wants to come up at a stage where everybody wants to scale up proven technology हो, लेकिन उधर तक पहुंचने के लिए कोई early stage support नहीं करना चाहता. Climate finance is basically financing of climate solutions, चाहे वो recycling के हों, चाहे वो renewable energy के हों, चाहे वो energy efficiency के हों, एक बहुत बड़ी field है. हम हर सेक्टर के अंदर there is a thing called sustainability. हम पावर यूज़ करते हैं, हम अपनी बिल्डिंग्स में यूज़ करते हैं, हम गाड़ियाँ जो यूज़ कर रहे हैं, जो आजकल एक कन्वर्सेशन चल रही है कि हम इलेक्ट्रिक व्हीकल्स में किस तरह ट्रांजिशन कर सकें. Decarbonization is basically what this climate sector is, and the financing of that and the availability of making that finance is what climate finance is. बहुत बड़ा सेक्टर है, मैं हर चीज़ खुद नहीं कवर करना चाह रहा, मैं अपने को पैनलिस्ट को भी कुछ दूंगा, बट बड़ा इम्पॉर्टेंट है कि हमारा जो फाइनेंशियल सेक्टर है, जो हमारा बैंकिंग सेक्टर है, वो अवेलेबल करे फाइनेंस इन सारे सॉल्यूशंस की फाइनेंसिंग को, बिकॉज सॉल्यूशंस एक तरफ बन के रख सकते हैं, वो मार्केट में तब तक नहीं आएंगे जब तक उसकी कोई फाइनेंसिंग नहीं होगी. एंड आई थिंक द बिगेस्ट एग्जांपल इज एवरीबडी नोस के पिछले 5 साल में अब हर छत के ऊपर हम सोलर देख रहे हैं, राइट. इट्स बिकम वेरी कॉमन. 5 साल पहले बैंक्स weren't willing to finance because उनके based on their thought process this was a very risky technology, but as soon as financing was available and lease products बनने शुरू हो गए, everybody started putting solar on the rooftop because there is a business case to it. So that's what climate finance is, and I'll over to co-panelists.
Yeah, so climate finance is, like you said, everything that has to do to mitigate or adapt to the climate change impacts. I think the one definition that we quote all the time is any finance that is local, national, transnational, from private, public, alternate funding sources, and is for adaptation and mitigation. Mitigation is low carbon, and adaptation is to adapt to the adverse impacts of climate change. I mean, very, very suitable to the context. Future Fest here, everybody's talking about innovation and technology. How do we see climate and technology together? Like you said, innovation pilots are high risk. But then again, somebody has to take, and that risk is also does correlate with the high impact. So if it's riskier, it will probably have high impact because you're dealing with something new which has not happened before. And you're dealing with something new because what you were doing previously has not had the impact. Hence the innovation and technology. Maybe we use various terms for climate finance interchangeably with sustainable finance, green finance, ESG, environment, social governance financing. There are various terms, and all of them actually mean a little different. Green finance is large. The objective of it includes economic and social aspects of it. ESG also has governance in it. And sustainable also involves environmental aspects of it. But climate finance, when we talk about climate, that's specifically a finance that deals with the adverse impacts of climate change. Either it provides low carbon solution or for the communities to adapt to the adverse effects of climate change. I think this is what I mean by that.
So I'll add to what Vardah and Salman have already said. And I'll give example, or actually quote, the CCDR, or the Country Climate Development Report that World Bank recently published. It's a very good diagnostic of the climate change issues in Pakistan and looks at what are the investment needs. And what it tells us is that between 2022, well now 2023 and 2030, the amount of investment that's required for Pakistan to be able to address its mitigation and adaptation challenges, it would require $348 billion, which is 10% of the GDP. Where is that money going to come from? That's where climate finance is required, right? I mean, these are all the different kinds of financing instrument, whether it is green bonds, concessional financing from multilateral agencies like World Bank that I represent here today, or if it's commercial financing, or it's political risk insurance, or guarantees, or some sort of credit line, or what Vardah is doing, climate accelerators, all of these are basically your climate financing, because public sector money and even private sector money is not within Pakistan. Local financing is not going to be enough to meet the kind of needs that Pakistan has. And I'll give you another figure. I mean, we did this energy transition study just to look at what it would require for Pakistan to achieve net zero by 2050, and Pakistan does not have a net zero energy target. And the figure that we got was $700+ billion, right? That's like around $20-30 billion a year. So Pakistan really needs to tap into climate financing, and we can talk about, there's a lot of challenges, but there are a lot of opportunities too. I'll stop here.
Well, thank you, Vardah, Salman, and what was your name again? Saadia. Okay, thank you. I'm very bad at names, so don't mind that, okay? So we'll begin with this specific question. Salman, I would really like to, highlight the fact that you really pointed out a very good point, that recycling is need of the hour, and you are doing, you're the CEO and you're an entrepreneur, you're dragging towards people. But if we see it on ground, we don't really see people hanging around and doing stuff which can, contribute towards recycling. For instance, we do have a trash can, and I do see people throwing, trash on their sides, not in the trash can. And then we have waste management in Lahore, and is going through bundles of, scandals and all that stuff. How can that transition be a smooth transition where, the local layman or a person like me who doesn't really know a lot about climate change, the effects of climate change, can contribute on its own as an individual?
Thank you. So specifically on waste management, मैं ये बोलूँगा कि waste management भी it's a subsector within the entire climate finance thing, in the climate domain. So waste management का solution मेरे नज़दीक वही है, and I say this as an ex-कबाड़िया now. मैंने waste management की वो हिस्सा भी कर लिया है जहाँ पे कचरा उठाया है, और मैं waste management के इस हिस्से पे हूँ जहाँ पे शुरू में हम waste को रोकें. Idea of my solution was everybody wants to better manage the waste or make pretty things out of the waste. Nobody's talking about how to reduce the waste in the first place. वेस्ट मैनेजमेंट तब नहीं शुरू होती जब आप कोई चीज़ डस्टबिन में फेंकते हैं. वेस्ट मैनेजमेंट तब शुरू होता है जब हम रिटेल आउटलेट में खड़े होकर ये डिसाइड करते हैं कि हमने टेट्रा पैक में से दूध पीना है या बॉटल वाटर पीनी है. उधर तो कंज्यूमर्स कुछ कर ही नहीं सकता, because कंज्यूमर के पास कोई ऑप्शन ही नहीं है. हेंस माई आइडिया ऑफ रीफिल स्टेशन, एटलीस्ट कुछ प्रोडक्ट्स जिनकी इंटेग्रिटी को आप मेंटेन कर सकते हैं, शैम्पू, सोप्स, कुकिंग ऑयल्स, लिक्विड, दिस दैट, उनको प्रोवाइड तो करें. अब हमने टेक्नोलॉजी बना दी है, बट I need the FMCGs to come on board. Okay, please come together with us. My job was to make a technology that can accurately dispense without altering the integrity of your product. So we've done that. So बहुत chicken and egg problems होते हैं, barriers होते हैं. जब कोई नई solution आप लेके जाते हैं, mindsets आपको change करने पड़ते हैं. मैंने solar का आपको बताया, 5 साल पहले कोई solar नहीं, मैंने solar से start किया था अपना business actually. लोगों को मिन्नतें करनी पड़ती थी, please solar लगा लो, तुम लोगों का benefit होगा, पैसे बचेंगे. बट कोई मानता नहीं था. और नाउ अल्हम्दुलिल्लाह सोलर का ये प्रॉब्लम हो गया कि सप्लाई चेन बॉटलनेक्स हो गए. वाई? कोई सब इन्वायरमेंटलिस्ट तो नहीं बन गए पिछले 5 साल में. लोगों ने देखा पैसे बच रहे हैं तो सोलर, और हम भी पैसे. सो फाइनेंशियल इंसेंटिव इज़ ऑलवेज द बेस्ट इंसेंटिव टू गेट एनी सोल्यूशन ऑन द ग्राउंड. फिर उसकी ऑटोमेटिकली फाइनेंसिंग भी आ सकती है. और लार्जली वेस्ट मैनेजमेंट का सोल्यूशन क्या है मेरे उसमें? वही सोल्यूशन है जो एनर्जी का सोल्यूशन है, डिसेंट्रलाइजेशन. पहले बड़े बड़े पावर प्लांट लगा करते थे, उनको हम फिर तार लगा के डिस्ट्रीब्यूट करते थे. अब क्या है, सोलर ऊपर लगा दिया, विंड यहाँ पे लगा दिया, इट्स कॉल्ड डिसेंट्रलाइजेशन. हम कचरा एक उठा के फिर एक जगह 15,000 ट्रक जाके उसको लैंडफिल में डंप करते नहीं. एक मोहल्ले से कचरा उठाएं, देयर इज़ अ थिंग कॉल्ड अ मटीरियल्स रिकवरी फैसिलिटी, वो वहाँ पे जाना चाहिए. हमने कराची में खुद ये कर रहे थे, बिफोर आई डिड ऑल ऑफ दिस. हम 70% कचरे को रीपर्पस कर रहे थे. पेपर अलग, प्लास्टिक अलग, मेटल अलग, टिन अलग, ऑर्गेनिक्स का कंपोस्ट बनाया. 70% ऑफ द वेस्ट कैन एक्चुअली बी वैल्यूबल. आई डोंट कॉल इट वेस्ट, आई कॉल इट वेस्टेड अपॉर्चुनिटी. और बाकी जो 30% रह गया उसको चलें आप लैंडफिल के अंदर लेके जाएं. बट ये पूरा वेस्ट कलेक्शन टू लैंड फिलिंग इज़ अ ब्रोकन सिस्टम. हम एक कॉन्ट्रैक्ट किसी और को दे देते हैं, दूसरा कॉन्ट्रैक्ट किसी और को दे देते हैं, तीसरा कॉन्ट्रैक्ट किसी और को दे देते हैं, और इसके अंदर आ जाते हैं प्रिंसिपल एजेंट प्रॉब्लम्स। और फिर ऑब्वियसली उसकी फाइनेंसिंग किसी को नहीं मिलती। जिसने कलेक्शन कर लिया उसने माल निकाल लिया वैल्यूबल वाला, उसके बाद कुछ बचा नहीं, तो वहाँ पे ब्रोकन सिस्टम हो जाता है। और कराची में स्पेशली जहाँ से मैं आ रहा हूँ, हमारा तो लैंडफिल हमारी गलियाँ हैं। जिसने कॉन्ट्रैक्ट किया हुआ है वेस्ट उठाने का, उसने वहाँ से जो वैल्यूबल माल है वो निकाल दिया, और फिर उसने अपना पेट्रोल बचाने के लिए हाईवे या उससे पहले समंदर, प्लस समंदर हमारा इज एन ओपन डंप यार्ड, सो वहाँ पे भेज दिया। तो इट्स एन इकोनॉमिक प्रॉब्लम, इट कैन बी सॉल्व्ड, जस्ट नीड विल पावर एंड देर आर फाइनेंशियल सोल्यूशंस टू ऑल ऑफ दिस। और जब आप कोई फाइनेंशियल या इकोनॉमिक सोल्यूशन निकालते हैं तो एंटरप्रेन्योर्स भी आ जाते हैं, और साथ में बैंक्स और बाकी सब चीज़ें और बाकी फाइनेंसिंग भी आ जाती है।
Very well explained, Salman, and I would really appreciate the fact कि आप इतनी in-depth research करके हैं अपने topic के बारे में, then and आपने post कबाड़िया लफ्ज़ use किया था, that's not post कबाड़िया, you're an entrepreneur and you're doing it really, really well over here. I'll move to Vardah. अच्छा Vardah, you were talking about the adaptation and mitigation policies. सलमान ने बात की है, ये तो चले layman और local man इनके अपने मसाइल हैं, खाने पीने के मसले हैं, चले ठीक है चोरी चकारी चलती है. On the state level, we don't see any adaptation and mitigation policies being very, very serious. Shri Rahman, we don't often see her, doing awareness campaigns in Pakistan. And then if we look closely, every winters we see smog coming in. We know the reasons why is it there. We have a new city building up near Lahore, Rabi City over there. Then cutting off the trees and billion tree tsunami, we don't really hear of that. Do you actually see the state owning this issue where adaptation and mitigation policies have to be very, very, has to be on ground, and they really need investment and really need people to look up for it?
So I think the challenge is the readiness for such projects. I think there's never an adequate policy and regulatory framework for anything. There's always a room for improvement. We do have climate change policy. We do have, at the provincial level also, policies that deal with it. And we have very, very specific, like I work a lot in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa. It's a smaller province, and there's a lot that's happening. We've recently approved a climate change policy along with the climate change action plan that has numerous actions that fall under adaptation and mitigation. All of that is there, but what is the challenge? The challenge is that the paper is there, the willingness is there too. Are you ready for it? Okay, you're ready for it as well. Do you have the finances to start it? Where are the financing? So we have problems at every step of the way. I just said that, innovation is important. Nobody is willing to take the risk. There are lots of external financing windows that we can tap into. Saadia was quoting some numbers, and within those numbers, just to put things into perspective, only energy transition in Pakistan requires over $100 billion. What do we mean by energy transition? Is basically starting from NDCs, 2021, which actually you have committed internationally to the world that you would reduce your emissions by 2030 by 50% of the projected emissions. How are you going to achieve that? You're going to bring your energy mix to renewable up to 60%. You will have 30% of the vehicles on the road as electric vehicles. You will ban the imported coal, and many others. That 50% reduction is just not going to come from thin air. There are things that need to be done to achieve that 50% reduction. We have committed as Pakistan, 35% of it cannot be achieved if we do not have access to external financing. 15% we can promise to do, but 35% of that. And we're talking about billions of dollars, like Saadia just said, we're talking about $700 billion. I mean, here, to raise a $100 million project is an ordeal. and it's a lot of challenge. So you're talking about billions of dollars that you need to raise. Climate finance, why are we talking about finance with climate here, is because access to finance is the most critical problem that we face right now. And climate change is probably going to be the single biggest obstacle in achieving the SDGs also for Pakistan. Because we're one of the most vulnerable nations in the world. Look what happened in floods. How much money has come in? The money that was already floating around, and I'm not going to target anyone in particular, multilaterals and all, they have repurposed the already committed money. What is the additional money that has come in? And it's not the world's fault. It's not the external financing sources' fault. Do you have bankable projects that any investor would come and readily invest in? I mean, we keep playing the victim card and keep saying we don't have access to funding, we need funding. 35% of the emissions reduction would come through external financing. Do we have projects that the investors would like? Do they trust the capacities that Pakistan has to disperse those funds and reach the beneficiaries where they should? So the whole ecosystem needs to be fixed. Just talking about policies, yes, you're right. Those have to be in place. But I think we have deeper issues than just having a better policy and regulatory framework. That should happen, of course. But I think the ecosystem, including the regulatory policy framework, needs to be fixed.
Thank you, Salman. Okay, so Vardah, thank you so much for such a clarification. And I will come back to you again and asking you about the whole policy-making thing. I would like to move to Saadia first and ask her that why haven't we really moved to renewable energy? Because seeing Balochistan is very, very, very rich above all the minerals and all that stuff. And then seeing Pakistan standing in a very worse position where we have to import all the stuff for our energy requirements is a collapse. So how can we transit there as well? Because renewable energy is the need of the hour, because we have load shedding over here. The fossils, everything that's burning is again causing climate catastrophe. What's the way through? Can really Pakistan make it through or what?
No, thank you for that question. And when Vardah was speaking, I was actually thinking about renewable energy policy, right? The new renewable energy policy we've had since 2020, right? It was a 2019 policy approved in 2020. How many renewable energy projects have actually come under that policy? Zero. Literally none. Many reasons. I mean, we're good at having policies, but when it comes to implementation, and over here I wouldn't say even access to financing isn't an issue, because there is private sector which is interested in financing those renewable energy projects. It's just been, I mean, we have this after 18th Amendment, provincial devolution, so provinces कहते हैं कि उनका भी right है वो कर comparative bidding अभी तक हम decide नहीं कर सके कि federal government ने करनी है कि provincial government ने करनी है. I think we just go ahead and do that comparative bidding, right, and then get the first renewable energy project under it. And Balochistan, you mentioned Balochistan. Balochistan has one of the best wind potentials in the world. And unfortunately, because of political reasons and law and order situation, it hasn't been, that resource and the potential hasn't been tapped. And actually, I would tie that to new technology as well. I don't know if you've heard of green hydrogen. Abhi energy transition, everyone's talking about green hydrogen, and it's literally just आपके electrolysis से आप जो है hydrogen or oxygen molecules को अलग करते हैं, and you get hydrogen, and that could be used for decarbonizing your industrial energy use in industries. And I'm saying this because Pakistan में जो ना renewables बहुत important है, but renewables पे आप सोचते हैं और आप ना electricity sector सोचते हैं कि आपकी जो electricity sector में जो energy mix है वो है कि 5% आपके wind and solar हो गया, and then you have around 32% hydro, and then you have rest, which is fossil fuels. But you forget about oil and gas use, right? And in terms of a primary energy use, industry and transport actually consumes around 60% of primary energy. So even if you decarbonize your electricity mix, you will still have demand for oil and gas, which is basically what you were talking about, right? Our energy imports. And green hydrogen can play a very important role in decarbonizing your industries. Now, you have Balochistan, which has all this solar and wind potential. You have Gwadar port. You could actually, the government can just put, do this shared infrastructure thing, जहाँ पे वो HVDC line लगा दें और private sector को कहे कि आप यहाँ पे आके अपना solar and wind plants लगाएं. You have the right enabling environment that you were talking about, and private sector can come in and put the electrolysis and manufacturing plant, and you have green hydrogen, which you can use locally as well, and you can actually export it to the rest of the world, especially Europe. We were in Amsterdam 3 months ago. Port of Rotterdam, जो है, तो वहाँ पर it used to be the biggest port, and I think it's the biggest port in Europe now. But they were talking about green hydrogen requirements of Europe and ambitious goals, and they're actually signing agreements with MENA countries. They're signing agreement with Brazil कि वहाँ से वो manufacture होगा, and they will export or import for them. They will import green hydrogen. And we were like, why can't Pakistan make use of this opportunity? Because we have renewable energy here, we have water over here, and we just need to have the right kind of frame, and you need to have the right kind of policies, and you can make it possible. आप बलूचिस्तान में कह दें कि law and order situation है, चलो वहाँ पे नहीं, आप सिंध में लगा लें, right? And World Bank and other multilateral institutions are actually ready to invest in something like this. In a neighboring country, India has this green hydrogen mission, and they also have ambitious goals, and they're being financed by private sector, but also by multilaterals. And so there's opportunity, but you need to have that growth mindset. और उसमें जो भी COP27 में जो हमारा performances was great, right? What Shahir Rahman did, she did a phenomenal job in terms of going and talking about, कि हमारे global north and global south, and how global south has been shortchanged by global north. But the thing is that you also need to come out of this mindset कि हमने तो contribution नहीं है emissions में और आप आके हमारी मदद करें. We need to go away from this mindset of कि हमें help करने के बजाय we need to show to the world we are going to be the leaders and show to the world how and what technology could be used and for a climate adaptation and climate mitigation. Instead of saying कि आप हमें help करें, आप ये कहें कि हम partner करेंगे और हम दिखाएंगे कि बाकी जो countries हैं who are vulnerable to climate change, how you could actually set an example for other countries for adaptation and mitigation, and the world will help you. But if you're going to have this mindset of this, I'm sure, sorry to use this word, but this beggar mindset, then it's going to be extremely difficult, and that's what we need to change.
I'm just going to say one thing before you ask.
No, please go ahead.
I want to just continue with the hydrogen story that you were saying. It is a beautiful narrative. In Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, I work with a project, Sustainable Energy and Economic Development, funded by FCDO, previously DFID. We are bringing hydrogen to the province. There is an identified investor already. It's a $200+ million project. But the problem again, it's expensive. The cost of production of 1 unit of hydrogen, 1 kg, is way more expensive than brown, gray, or blue hydrogen. So we're stuck. Again, I think we'll tackle that question. You may have that. The concessional financing, when we say climate finance, it's just not any finance we're talking about. A loan, equity, any layer, bonds, any layer of commercial financing. We're also talking about what is the need of Pakistan for concessional financing to enable these innovations within renewable energy. Solar, wind, hydel, intermittent energy sources. सर्दियों में hydel बंद हो जाएगा, solar, धूप नहीं है तो solar नहीं मिलेगा, हवा नहीं है तो wind. What do you do when these are intermittent renewable resources, there has to be a backup, always, always. It's just fossil fuel-based backup that we rely on. How are we going to have that energy transition if we don't explore other renewable, clean, renewable sources of energy? So, I mean, thank you so much for bringing up the hydrogen concept. It's very close to my heart also. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much for a very in-depth and well thought. We'll get back into that as well. While Saadia was talking, she said a very good thought. She said that Pakistan is really good in making policies, but really bad in implementing them. The whole point comes back to the implementation process. Even if we have money in our pocket, we don't know how to utilize the whole thing. So, does Pakistan have innovative plans or innovative, roadmaps to utilize their money, or not even the money? Do they even have roadmaps, innovative roadmaps? Because as you were telling us earlier कि पाकिस्तान के अंदर इस तरह के लूप होल्स पाए जाते हैं कि हर चीज़ यहाँ पे महकमे है, यहाँ पे ब्यूरोक्रेसी है, यहाँ पे लोग पाए जाते हैं, लॉ एंड ऑर्डर है, सारा कुछ है, लेकिन बट दैट्स गोइंग द रॉन्ग वे फॉर द रॉन्ग मीन्स. व्हाट आर द इनोवेटिव वेज कि यार 3-4 साल के अंदर हम वो एक अच्छी ट्रांजिशन देख लें और पाकिस्तान के अंदर जो क्लाइमेट कैटास्ट्रफी है इसको हम एज अ चैलेंज नहीं, एज अ ब्रेक थ्रू देखें कि पाकिस्तान को दुनिया भर में एक मिसाल के तौर पर कायम किया जा सके.
आई थिंक जहाँ तक क्लाइमेट फाइनेंस की बात है, हम एक चीज़ तो भूल रहे हैं कि फाइनेंशियली अवेलेबल है. किसी ने आपको $2 बिलियन देने, वो कैसे देंगे? वो आपको डायरेक्ट बैंक ट्रांसफ़र तो नहीं करेंगे. एक रियलाइजेशन हिट करती है हम सबको कि हमारे बैंकर्स को ये समझना है सब्जेक्ट, एंड दैट्स अ वेरी स्केरी थॉट, राइट. कैपेसिटी तो होनी चाहिए हमारे फाइनेंशियल इंस्टीट्यूशंस में, दैट आवर बैंक्स नीड एंड आवर कमर्शियल एंड फाइनेंशियल इंस्टीट्यूशंस नीड टू अंडरस्टैंड दैट दिस इज़ अ सेक्टर दे नीड टू काइंड ऑफ डेल्व इनटू, राइट. तो पिछले 4-5 साल से एक बहुत बड़ी एक कोशिश की जा रही है एटलीस्ट स्टेट बैंक ऑफ पाकिस्तान की तरफ से कि वो ग्रीन बैंकिंग को पाकिस्तान के अंदर लाएं. बिकॉज ग्रीन क्लाइमेट फंड एक बनाया गया था यूएन के किसी कॉप के अंदर, जिसमें $100 बिलियन जो डेवलप नेशंस ने डेवलपिंग नेशंस को देने हैं वो ग्रीन क्लाइमेट फंड में पार्क होंगे. लेकिन हम कोई प्रोजेक्ट्स अप्लाई करेंगे, कोई बैंक के थ्रू अप्लाई करेंगे तो वो फंड्स आएंगे ना. कोई हमारे लिए लाइन लगा के तो नहीं बैठा हुआ कि ये फंड है प्लीज़ आप ले लें. कोई प्रोजेक्ट बनाएगा, कोई प्रोजेक्ट को अप्लाई करेगा, एंड सम बैंकिंग इंटरमीडियरी इन पाकिस्तान और फाइनेंशियल इंस्टीट्यूशन नीड्स टू हैव दैट कैपेसिटी टू गेट दोज ग्रीन फंड्स, इंटरनेशनल ग्रीन फंड्स अवेलेबल एंड देन डिस्ट्रीब्यूटेड, right? So banks kind of need to understand that there is a concept of green funds available, and they need to kind of also update them. Nobody is going to do business with you now in financial while the world is moving towards implementing ESG into their systems. यहाँ पे अगर आपका बैंकिंग इंस्टीट्यूट को बेसिक इन्वायरमेंटल रिस्क मैनेजमेंट नहीं इम्प्लीमेंट की होगी तो आपको वो फंड्स नहीं मिलेंगे. यहाँ पे आपको ये बताता चलूँ, जो हमारे टेक्सटाइल्स हैं सबसे ज़्यादा जो पिछले 4-5 साल में कॉरपोरेट्स ने ग्रीन की तरफ आए हैं वो टेक्सटाइल्स आए हैं. पता है क्यों? क्योंकि उनके जो बायर्स थे बाहर बैठे हुए, ज़ारा, H&M, उन्होंने कहा था कि वी विल स्टॉप बाइंग फ्रॉम यू टिल द टाइम अगर आपने 2022 तक ग्रीन नहीं हुए, यानी कि आपके टारगेट्स. तो वो दबा के उन्होंने सोलर लगाना शुरू किया, वाटर रिसाइकलिंग. सो दे वर फोर्स्ड टू डू ऑल ऑफ दोज थिंग्स. So similarly for the banking sector, the climate funds will not be available to you. The banks don't now implement these concepts, don't comply with what's called the TCFD or TFCD rules होते हैं. तो हमें क्लाइमेट फाइनेंस के लिए अपना बैंकिंग और फाइनेंशियल इंस्टीट्यूशंस को रिफॉर्म करना है. तो स्टेट बैंक ऑफ पाकिस्तान ने 4-5 साल पहले ग्रीन बैंकिंग गाइडलाइंस लाए थे. उनको कहा था कि आप मैंडेटरी अपने क्रेडिट रिस्क में इन्वायरमेंटल रिस्क मैनेजमेंट को भी लाएं. इसका मतलब ये है कि पहले जब बैंक्स आपको लोन देते थे तो वो जनरली जाके पता करते थे कि अगर हम एक इंडस्ट्री को लोन दे रहे हैं तो इनका बैलेंस शीट कितना है, इनका रेवेन्यू कितना है. अगर वही इंडस्ट्री केमिकल का पानी वाटर के अंदर फेंक के इन्वायरमेंटल डिजास्टर क्रिएट कर रही है तो ये बैंकर का काम नहीं होता था कि इसको असेस करें. हालांकि इट्स अ क्रेडिट रिस्क. कल को इन्वायरमेंटल अथॉरिटी ने उस फैक्ट्री को बंद कर दिया तो आपका बैंक लोन नॉन परफॉर्मेंस लोन हो जाएगा. बैंकर्स को ये समझाना पड़ा कि आपका क्रेडिट रिस्क और इन्वायरमेंट रिस्क जुड़ा हुआ है. It's good business policy for you as a bank to now go and do environmental risk management. तो ये policies अब mandate की जा रही हैं और बैंकिंग सिस्टम को भी अपग्रेड किया जा रहा है. वरना आप प्राइवेटली बैंकर से पूछेंगे, कहेंगे यार हमारा क्या क्लाइमेट से ताल्लुक, हमें पैसे देने हैं, वर्किंग कैपिटल को देना है, सेट को पैसे चाहिए होते हैं, हम आगे दे देंगे. सो every sector in the economy has to upgrade themselves. That's the one thing I keep telling the young people as well. जब मैं स्टूडेंट्स को अपने कुछ पढ़ाता हूँ कि आप हेल्थ में चले जाएं, आप एजुकेशन में चले जाएं, आप टेक सेक्टर में चले जाएं, everybody's energy and environment, it's like integrated into every aspect of our lives. And that's, one of the reasons why we kind of need that innovation in our processes and upgradation in our processes to access climate finance.
Thank you, and I'll ask Vardah to comment on that as well if she wants. The question for Vardah is this: that we do need, some domestic policies or domestic plans to get figured out that how can we invest in the system to go green or green revolution, to bring green revolution over here as well. And then if we can see the market, they're not ready for that yet. And how do you see the global inequality? Because the incentives are there on paper, it's in the air, but it's not on the ground. The banks, international banks, they do promise us to give us money, but then it's Pakistan here again, the most corrupt nation coming in the top list as well. So they're not really satisfied to give Pakistan money at the same time. The challenges are much more bigger than the problems over here in Pakistan. How can we address that? Do we have any, ways, or can we just figure that out domestically, if not internationally?
Yeah, so I'm just going to expand on what was being discussed. Green Climate Fund that you spoke about. To Pakistan, since the beginning, we have two accredited agencies, which actually, so you have to go through those agencies, national agencies, to access those funding. Only 4 projects have been approved up till now. And the commitment, over that. 4 projects, $131 million. Only 20% of that committed money has been dispersed to Pakistan. You can add 2 plus 2 and you know what is the scene. You can see how many projects have been approved in your neighborhood, within the region, East Asian economies and all of that. So Pakistan is lagging behind in terms of accessing these windows. On the positive side of it, I'm afraid, the whole conversation is being very, it's not all doom and gloom. I think there are some positives also. You're talking about, there are sectoral strategies that are being made. Linking, so what the problem largely is that we work in silos. There's a policy, then some department in some province will come up with its own strategy. They will have their own targets. How do you link the renewable energy with the NDC, with the climate change policy? So the narrative has to be the same and very jointed. Right now we have beautiful policies, beautiful strategies, everything, but very disjointed. There is no single narrative. In COP27, I kept on struggling with the Pakistani narrative. Is it that, we're victims, give us aid? Or is it that give us money, we'll repay this back to you, and we have the capacity to do everything that it takes to channelize that money for the objective that the money would be given to us to. So that is the whole issue. The narrative is so confused. Every other strategy that you read is in a silo. So I think the larger problem is that, the departments have to start talking to each other, the policies and the strategies have to start talking to each other. You come to the projects much later. Of course, that is the most important thing. But even at the larger, regulatory framework and the framework level, these are just disjointed conversations that we're having. I'm going to come back to the concessionary financing bit. That's very important, can never be undermined. I don't know why there is no talk about it. Why are we talking about aid? Why aren't we moving from aid to investment? How else would you be accountable for the money that you get? I mean, I know that, all these 8 projects, how do they end? What is the benefit of it? Do you ever measure the impact and quantify the impact of the money that has gone? So yeah, I think that these are very challenging and difficult topics to, and we keep on coming back to the negatives of it, and how bad Pakistan is, the capacities are low, the capabilities are not there. One bit that we're really missing in the conversation is the private sector's role in it.
I'm afraid we're really out of the time, but I'll take one last question from Saadia, and then maybe you guys can close off with small comments as well. Saadia, can you just tell us that how can we create a sustainable momentum addressing the three big P's where profit, planet, and people can be really, really, encouraged and addressed? How do you see that happening in Pakistan especially?
Because time is less, so I'll be quick. But actually add to what Vardah was saying, and I think what I've learned in my 3.5 years at the World Bank and my previous experience, the government and the private sector needs to work together. There's a very strong role of the private sector and entrepreneurs. I think that's the positive direction. The direction that I see Pakistan going in is that we have all these young entrepreneurs that are coming and doing phenomenal work. And I think the government should work to enable those entrepreneurs rather than being hurdles. And when I say a hurdle ना बने, मैं बात करूँ कि regulations जितनी कम करें उतनी बेहतर है. जहाँ compliance जितनी कम मांगे उतनी बेहतर है. Because wherever government gets involved more, that's where the problem starts. And I just give example because I work on energy efficiency. So you talk about cooling load, right? Air conditioning, Aisha was also talking about. And we've had building codes since 2011. So has actually been implemented? Do we have buildings that are being, or houses that are being constructed which are actually energy efficient? No. And now, as actually part of the world, one of our projects, we're looking at ways of how we can incentivize people to build energy efficient houses or buildings rather than going the other side. कि आप compliance इतनी strong, इतने regulations बना दो, इतनी compliance जिसमें आपको inspectors चाहिए उनको जाके वो check करें और फिर वो बात आ जाएगी कि capacity नहीं है पाकिस्तान की. So that's why forget about building capacity. I mean, that's important, but ये ना कहें कि पहले कैपेसिटी होगी तो फिर ये होगा. तो आप दूसरी तरीके से काम करें कि आप किस तरह इंसेंटिवाइज करें कंज्यूमर को थ्रू फाइनेंसिंग, एंड हियर हैविंग concessionary financing or some sort of credit line through a financial intermediary where a building owner, a house owner could actually go and get concessional financing for energy efficient housing. Similarly, an SME or industry can go and get concessional financing for any kind of energy efficiency measure. So that's sort of my takeaway from my experience, that you have to, ease on the regulations, ease on the compliance, and create that enabling environment for the private sector, and think about carrots more than the sticks. And you'll see a very beautiful relationship there between the government and the private sector. And that's what I've seen in other countries as well, where they've been able to achieve this, is where you have more entrepreneurs coming out, where there's a very nice collaboration between public and private sector. So
Well, thank you, Saadia, again so much. And sadly, we're out of time. And I really wanted to talk more about it, since you guys are the professional and the best people around here in Lahore as well. So again, thank you so much. And I really hope that Future Fest brings more events like these where we can talk about future of the Pakistan. And the question still remains there. Can Pakistan make it? Maybe it can, maybe it won't. I don't know. Let's see. Thank you so much.